All right, let's go. So, welcome to another episode of eCom Raw Reality, where we talk all things e-commerce, Shopify, Meta ads, Google ads, email marketing, and in this one, let's talk about the weekend, because today is actually a Saturday, and in most cases, most people actually take a break, right? But if we're talking about e-commerce, if we're talking about ads, they never sleep, right? More or less, because you won't get as many sales during 3, 4, 5 a.m. but still the ads will run just at lower spend. And this is actually a very important subject, and I'll tell you why. Because if you think about it, right, especially if you're a CMO, growth marketer, media buyer, paid ads guy, whatever, right? I don't even like the word media buyer. I prefer paid media guy. You know, it just sounds better, or gal. However, let's think about it, because the weekend, as we know, in most places, just like especially here in Europe, most people don't work during the weekend, because work balance is slightly more towards the lifestyle. But this is where you do get, I would say, disproportionate results if you actually also do some work, I would say, during the weekend. And let me tell you why. So, if you think about it, the month has around 30 days, right? 31, 28, around that. And usually, let's say we have around 4 weeks, 4 solid weeks during the month. And 4 weeks basically means 4 weekends. Each weekend has 2 days, that means 8 days, right? So if you put it into perspective, in just 1 month, if you compare someone who looks at the ads just, let's say, for around 20 days, and someone who looks at the ads for 28 days, if you compare the delta between the two, and of course you could make a graph and extrapolate over a long time, but if you think about it, how much more is that actually in percentage? So 10% of 20 is 2. So if you think about it, it's basically 40%, right? So the difference between someone who looks at ads just 5 days a week versus during the weekend as well is a 40% increase. And that's just in 1 month. Do 40% each month for a year, and then you'll see the actual difference. And this is where compounding and just having amazing results happens over time, you know, because if you actually put in some extra time, some extra effort, then you just get way better and higher volume results, right? And of course, I'm saying this from experience, because why would brands, you know, pay thousands of dollars for someone just to kind of, let's say, look at their ads, drive the strategy, sometimes also help with creative strategy. But yeah, honestly, sometimes it's actually easier than that. Sometimes it's harder. That's why I try to make sure that I charge as much as possible while still making brands enough money. Because if you think about it, right, the difference between getting someone for, let's say, on the low side, 2K, right? And then someone who you pay maybe 5K, but they bring you 40% results, 40% better results to some extent, right? Month after month after month for 1 year. I mean, that's a huge difference. But let's be practical right now, right? Because is the weekend actually better for e-commerce brands? Well, it depends, but for many, it is to some extent. It is, because we were comparing the time before, right? But the thing is that during the weekend you do get slightly better results for many brands, because people do tend to buy closer to the weekend. And especially right now, for example, one brand that I work with, they have a Father's Day sale. So guess what? We have a timer, we have an offer, urgency, scarcity, it's ending. So of course we'll have much better results, and I'll probably increase the spend 20%, 30%, 40%, who knows how much. It depends on results. That's why I'll have to check the data later today and then make some adjustments for tomorrow. And as you can see, I still have time to go outside, so it's not as if you have to actually spend like your entire day, your entire time watching data and so on. But of course, it's easier if you also enjoy it. That's why personally, I've started to do this more and more, because I think this is where my strength is. Actually looking at data, understanding what works, what doesn't, patterns, not so much being on calls, chatting and so on, right? Someone else would probably enjoy being on calls all day, 8 hours a day. For me, not so much. So that is where you also need to know your strength, your weakness, because I still find to this day, 2025, so many brands, big ones, smaller ones at times, especially the smaller ones, but even the big ones, like they're making so many mistakes. And imagine if you go to a brand that makes, let's say 200K, 300K revenue, that means net profit of maybe 40K, 60K, right? So of course you can charge easily 5K, 8K, 10K, right? Depends on the scope. But that's because you actually do bring that value. And yeah, it's one of the most important things overall when it comes to advertising, because the ads are very close to the sale, right? It's the ads, landing page, email, those three are the closest basically to the sale. And paid ads are actually the only ones which run all day, every day. So if you actually make adjustments, that's like one of the highest leverage activities for most brands. And that's why you actually need to pay a premium for someone who is really capable. Like I've taken accounts from, let's say Indians, right? Nothing against them, but I mean, it's not as if, unless you know someone who is like an amazing paid media guy from there, right? And they have a personal brand, but usually most brands go there because they want cheaper labor, right? And for example, I charge US prices because it doesn't matter where someone is, right? Like what really matters is actually the value. And of course, one of the reasons why you would pay more for someone in the US, it's because they can speak English and so on. But if you also get that, and of course it might be slightly harder for people in Asia to go through these stages, right, and become very comfortable speaking English, not have like a very deep accent and all of that, right? I mean, these are other things. I would talk about this if I would talk about, I guess, the agency world, but right now it's mostly about eCom, because in eCom you do have these windows of opportunity, just like I was saying earlier. Father's Day right now, and we can talk more about what's coming up in July, but almost every month has its theme, you know, just like many people are expecting Christmas, right? I'm also expecting Christmas and Black Friday. I know I'll buy a bunch of shit during Black Friday, and of course during Christmas I'll make gifts, as many gifts as maybe possible during that time. It depends on who I'm communicating with during that time, right? But we all buy stuff during that time. However, during the summer, you don't have the luxury of people just buying left and right without any reason. So that's where marketing psychology actually comes into play. That's why I was talking earlier about the perception of someone who invests more time, because that's how actually I'm presenting or pitching my offer, because that's actually true. Like it makes sense if I actually let someone know that are they going to pay for an agency, right? A big bucks for a big agency where they get like an intermediate media buyer, a junior, whatever on that account, which doesn't give a shit because they'll not even work there in 2 years maybe, or even 1 year, 6 months. I mean, I've seen it all almost when it comes to eCom, to who brands work with and what type of results they get. And that's why it's really important to focus on results in most cases, because I believe I've rarely, if any time, taken an account from anywhere and had a worse performance, you know, worse results in general. Just because I would stay up all night if necessary, just to make sure that my results are not worse, right? Because it is also on you to look at the data to understand what's happening, and it's still about time. Yeah, you can shorten that time due to experience. That's why right now I can work with over 10-15 brands at the same time, just because I do have the experience. So it takes me sometimes 3 minutes, 4 minutes to look over data, you know, which is enough. So that's why even during the weekend, if you can look at 15 ad accounts for like 4 minutes each, it takes maybe 1 hour or more, but you can see what's happening, right? It's just like checking your pulse or weight each day. If you check it each day, of course, there's a higher likelihood for you to actually get better results, right? So it's just logic if you think about it, and it's inputs and outputs. So this is how I'll end it. And right now, getting back home, looking at the data again, because it's never a bad idea. All of the things that you do as a human, right? I think my transmitter just died for a second, not sure. All right, so it might have died for a second here, so let's end it. This was a sign that it's been long enough. And basically until next time, peace out.